he had a week, and he was. He had finished the fortifications and had 72,000 men in the works. On the 8th day, when no enemy appeared, the newspaper accused him of creating a big scare, of crying wolf. One of Wallace's friends said, "If the enemy should not come after all this fuss, you will be ruined." "Very well," he said, "but they will come, or if they do not, it will be because this same fuss has caused them to think better of it." Lew Wallace was 35 years old, a small, thin man, about 5 feet 7 inches tall, with closely cropped black hair, mustache, and chin whiskers. He was intelligent, articulate, and well-liked by his men. He was grateful for being placed in command in the emergency. At the time, he was in disgrace and on the shelf without an assignment. He was fishing on the Kankakee River in northern Indiana. The reason he was off duty was because at Shiloh he was camped 5 miles north of the battlefield and failed to march the 5 miles to get into the fight on the first day. The Confederate Army surprised and whipped Grant that day, and he never forgave Lew Wallace. Wallace would go on to have much success in life, including the great defense of Cincinnati. Later, at the Battle of Monocacy in Maryland on July 9, 1864, he formed his men in an ideal defensive position on a bluff on the Monocacy riverbank and delayed General Early's attack on Washington one vital day, giving time for reinforcements to arrive and help save Lincoln's capital city. Lincoln loved Lew Wallace. In 1873, Wallace published Ben-Hur, one of the most best-selling novels in all time. In the 1880s, he was minister to Turkey. He was governor of the Mexico Territory for a while. We are honored that Lew Wallace is a part of our history, and very fortunate because he was such a great writer and speaker. We have his words to celebrate. Bernie O'Brien, one of our staff members at Northern now, reenacts General Lew Wallace for Battery Hooper Days and other reenactments and does a great job. In the Northern Kentucky crisis at daylight on September 10, 1862, 9 days since the first alarm, Wallace looked out over the Fort Mitchell parapet and saw on the horizon to the south 8,000 experienced soldiers, infantry, artillery, and cavalry. He was thrilled. No commander in the Civil War was more glad to see the enemy advancing on his position. The Confederate commander, General Henry Heath, was 36. He was a West Point graduate from Virginia. He was a close friend of Robert E. Lee and the only Confederate general who Lee addressed by his first name, Henry. Heath and his division had brightened up when they reached Boone County. People gathered in the streets of Walton and Florence to welcome them and joyously cheered, "Hurrah for Jeff Davis!" With the recent victory in the Battle of Richmond, Kentucky in mind, which was a real Confederate rout of the inexperienced Union Army, men in the ranks said they would march against the Newport and Covington Yankees, give one big yell, and they would run like a flock of sheep, allowing the invaders to run pell-mell into Covington. Heath and his men appeared south of Fort Mitchell at daylight on September 10. And all day that day and the next, he rode back and forth, reconnoitering the defenses Wallace had built. At one point, Heath dismounted and climbed on top of the house of Levi Hicks on the turnpike, Dixie Highway today, and reconnoitered Fort Mitchell with his field glasses. On the parapet below the stars and stripes, he saw a small officer with a broad-brimmed hat looking back with his field glasses. It was General Wallace. The opposing generals stared at each other through their binoculars. Wallace's artillery officer pleaded for permission to fire at Heath. "I forbade it," Wallace recalled. "There were women and children under the roof, and good policy, as it appeared to me, demanded that the enemy should be allowed to see from a distance all he could of what he had to go against." Very wise. Lew Wallace knew if we kill the commander, we'll have a mess. The commander's out there, alive and well, he'll see what he's got, and he'll go away. Yes, it was wise, Adam Reed, one of our geography students, produced a map on GIS, Geography Information Systems, and determined that these defenses, once they're built with cannon later on, covered every inch in front of them. All the cannon were not there 15 of 80 later, but Whitelaw Reed, Cincinnati, Ohio historian and reporter, also said this was as strong a defense as any in the war. Both sides sent pickets forward and they fired at each other for 2 days. Civil War soldiers described their greatest fear of death arising in the period just before a battle. After a battle began, the excitement and activity of firing and reloading created an exhilarating feeling. Their fighting when blood was up, they said, meaning their adrenaline was flowing. In northern Kentucky, for men on both sides, the time of greatest fear extended over 2 lengthy days. The Union men formed in line of battle in the darkness at 3 a.m. both days, and men on both sides assumed the battle would begin any moment. Isaac Jackson wrote to his brother, he was on the Union side, "About 3 o'clock this morning, the officers came and waked us up and whispered for us to get up and form in line and not make any noise. All the campfires were put out, cartridge boxes filled, crackers issued, and scouts sent out, and then we were ready for a fight. We stayed there until about 6 o'clock when we were ordered to stack arms and get breakfast. All the hills are covered with troops and rifle pits. I cannot look in any direction without seeing soldiers, and there is some guns planted on the points of the hills. I expect there are 50,000 troops on this side of the river." He was in Campbell County. "We kept a lookout for the Johnnies all day and lay on our arms all night," wrote Jonas Bugman in his diary during the second day. One of the Confederates wrote in the first day, "Every moment we expect the battle to commence." Next day he wrote, "Pickets have been skirmishing all day, and 2 of the Federals said to be killed. 4 Union men were killed and 3 wounded. 2 Confederate soldiers were wounded and 16 captured. Joseph Johns of the Black Brigade, 28, and the father of a young child, was killed when a tree they were cutting down fell on him." Union Home Guard Lieutenant Colonel William Neff from Cincinnati wrote that word came during the second night that the rebels would attack at daylight the next morning. At 3 o'clock, the long roll sounded and the entire army was under arms and in line of battle. No attack was made. In the afternoon, we were again ordered out in full assurance of an immediate attack. Another militia officer, 45-year-old Henry Howe, recalled, "At all events, the hours were of sharp anxiety. He had come a little later and had crossed on the pontoon bridge, which opened on September 5th, the 3rd day of the crisis, of the alarm. And he appreciated the value of the bridge for moving men across the river to the defenses, but he also realized it could be the focus of a Union retreat if there was one. He said the pontoon bridge filled his mind with dread. Quote, if Heath rushed the works with all his might, and my citizen soldiers fell into a panic, each one of them would betake himself to that bridge, and then what wholesale drowning there might be." End quote. On the second day, when it appeared most likely that Heath would attack, Wallace and his staff rode along the line and the men cheered him loudly. He told one regiment, "Stay behind your breastworks and they'll never get through." Heath disguised scouts as farmers going to market and sent them into Covington and Newport. He interviewed travelers heading south from the area, and from several reports learned that the Union positions were connected by military roads and a pontoon over the Ohio and over the Licking River. Heath knew if they're this well organized to build a bridge over the Ohio and over the Licking, and to put all these men out here, 72,000 of them, he didn't know exactly how many, but knew there were a lot of them. This is a real strong defense. He was impressed that the men in and around Fort Mitchell in the center of Wallace's line wore Union blue, faded Union blue, and moved around like regulars. That meant that they were soldiers, not militia, not home guards. And not counting the militia, the fact was Wallace was outnumbered almost 3 to 1 by soldiers. He was outnumbered, when you counted the militia, 9 to 1. So he's outnumbered almost 3 to 1 by soldiers, almost 9 to 1 total. The axiom in the Civil War was to take a position like they had built in northern Kentucky. It takes a 3-to-1 advantage to take it, capture it. So instead of a 3-to-1 advantage, General Heath had a 3-to-1 or 9-to-1 disadvantage. Heath reported the strength of the defenses to General Edmund Kirby Smith in Lexington. Kirby Smith attempted to send reinforcements, but finding it impossible, ordered Heath to withdraw, which he did during the night of the second day. I believe Henry Heath came to fight. I believe he came to take Cincinnati. He was a fighter. He later started the Battle of Gettysburg. Mosby wrote that he didn't go into Gettysburg looking for shoes, like they say. He went into Gettysburg looking for a fight. He got it. He was severely wounded and lost half of his men in 23 minutes. Second, Heath wrote in his memoirs that he was forming in battle line for an attack when the Curve from Lexington rode up with orders to withdraw. Third, he told Lew Wallace 2 or 3 years after the war when they met at the Burnett House in Cincinnati. He said he intended to capture Cincinnati and threatened to sack it from end to end unless city officials paid a ransom of $15 million. Fourth, what impresses me most is correspondence in the official records showing how determined Kirby Smith was to attack Ohio. Once he received Heath's report on the strength of the Union defenses, Kirby Smith seriously attempted to reinforce him. That proved impossible, and he sent the order to Heath ordering him to withdraw. But immediately, Kirby Smith ordered John Hunt Morgan to proceed without delay with all your cavalry that can be collected and march to northern Kentucky to meet with Heath on his withdrawal and discuss, quote, the advisability of making an expedition into the state of Ohio with your command, quote, close. Morgan sent 6 companies under John Hutchinson, and they marched to Walton, and instead of crossing the Ohio, united with Heath's division, screening his retreat. For the next few weeks, about half of Morgan's command under Basil Duke screened the Lexington front. And one morning, as Jack Browse will tell you in his talk, Duke's men attacked and skirmished with a Union force camped at Snow's Pond between Walton and Ridgewood and captured 49 Union men. And Jack has donated the Kentucky Historical Society highway marker for the site, and we congratulate and appreciate you for that, Jack. At dawn on the morning of September 12, on the hills of northern Kentucky, word passed by Camp Grapevine that the rebels were gone. Then one of those unique events that makes the Civil War more dramatic in reality than fiction, something the men who experienced it said they would never forget. What occurred was the men in the trenches began singing John Brown's body. Others joined that one man and spread from regiment to regiment, hearts united in victory, voices reverberating along the hills and through the valleys. John Brown's body lies moldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. In General Lew Wallace's victory proclamation, he said, "In coming times, strangers viewing the works on the hills of Newport and Covington will ask, 'Who built these entrenchments?' You can answer, 'We built them.' If they ask who guarded them, you can reply, 'We helped in thousands.' If they inquire the result, your answer will be, 'The enemy came and looked at them and stole away in the night.'" Jesse Grant and Hannah were safe in Covington in the Civil War as anti-slave Methodists. When Vicksburg was taken by their son, a band came and serenaded them in front of their duplex on Green Street. And at the end of the war, they were celebrated and serenaded and congratulated. When the war ended in Kentucky, in places like Louisville and Lexington, there was silence, but in Covington and Newport, there were public celebrations.